So I wanted to quickly get on here and discuss something. First of all, thank you for all the support on the first video. I really appreciate it. If you guys like the content, like the video, subscribe, etc. Comment what you think. But I wanted to quickly touch on something. This isn't going to be like my Toronto video where I have a bunch of edits and stuff. I'm just going to kind of shoot from the hip here. And this is going to be a lot of my content. If you follow me on Instagram, you understand these quick little reels that I post where I'm just talking. And that's kind of what I'm best at. So that's what we're going to do. And today I wanted to talk about the NHL draft and draft philosophy. And it's something I've touched on my Instagram page, but it's something I kind of wanted to get my full thoughts out on. And the Montreal Canadiens are kind of the team everybody's talking about this year, but this applies for any team, right? Every year we see a team reach in the draft for somebody to fill a team need instead of drafting best player available. And my philosophy in hockey has always been take best player available, figure the rest out later. Because taking the best player available will always give you the most flexibility later. Even if that player doesn't end up working out as an NHLer, if he was consensus to go in that spot, you're more likely to get value back from in a trade or whatnot, usually in a trade. Whereas reaching for a player, even if it's 6 or 7 picks, you have to make sure that guy works out on your team, basically. And Montreal's the example this year because everybody's saying that at 5, they're going to take a forward. And now if that forward is Lindstrom, sure. Like, I have him around the 5th overall pick. He's my 3rd best forward. 5 is fine. But if he goes before Montreal, right, and Celebrini, Demidov, and Lindstrom go in some combination in the first 4 picks, it'll probably be Celebrini and then Demidov, and then Lindstrom goes either to Anaheim or Columbus. Then if I'm Montreal, I'm taking a defenseman 10 times out of 10. There are so many high-level defensemen at the top of this draft. And reaching for... Iginla's kind of the pick that everybody's talking about. And reaching for him when he should go 9 based on best overall talent, maybe, and 9 might even be pushing it, isn't what I would do. And the reason for that is this, right? And everybody's going to talk about, well, Montreal's got this elite defensive pool. And that's true, right? If you go through kind of their younger defensemen, you got Gooley, Harris, Struble, Barron, Jackeye, Mayu, Hudson, Reinbacher are all probably going to have a shot at making the team. I mean, Hudson is going to make the team next year. Reinbacher might. That's a really good defensive pool. I get it, right? I understand that is, like, it's a very good young defensive pool. But a lot of people are already talking about moving on from Harris. A lot of people are already talking about moving on from Struble. And I don't... Like, I get it, right? Because they have a bunch. But what's the problem of having another NHL-level defenseman in that pool, right? Because at worst, you have 9 NHL-level defensemen, and you can trade 3 of them and get very good forward assets back. Or maybe you can get a goalie asset back, or you can get draft capital back, right? You can weaponize that talent. Whereas if you take Iginla, even if he works out, you're still not maximizing the value of that pick because you could have traded down. But you're really only taking him just to make sure he helps your team, which I get. An early pick, you want the guy to impact your team, yes. But when you have the opportunity to get a better asset, and an asset that's going to be more valuable to the league, then you should do that. Because even if it doesn't work out for your team, then he can work out for somebody else, and they can give you a bunch of stuff back for him. This isn't the NFL, where everybody you draft is either going to make your team immediately, right? Some might make your practice squad, or they're going to get cut, and you're never going to see them again, right? That's how the NFL draft works. So obviously teams draft for need. It's a different sport, right? Even in the NBA, right? Teams will take a point guard if they're super weak at point guard over a center who might go 2 picks before, But again, in the NBA, you're either on the roster or you're in the G League or you're cut, right? The NHL is different because you can send them back to the minors, or you can send them back to junior, whether that's the Canadian Hockey League, whether that's the NCAA, whether that's Europe. Then you can send them to the minors, which could be the ECHL or the AHL for a higher pick. It's hopefully the AHL. And then you can put them on your team, right? So if you draft somebody, even at 5th overall, they might not impact your team for another 3 years, right? So reaching for somebody because you think you might have a hole on your team in 3 years is just kind of silly, because as a GM, you should be looking to fill that hole on your roster like now, right? Like you should always be trying to improve your team for the next year. So taking somebody because he might fill a hole down the line instead of taking the best player available and then figuring the rest out later is just poor asset management. And again, like I'm picking on Montreal because Montreal is kind of the team in this discussion right now. They're the team that everybody thinks the draft kind of starts with this year, where they could reach for any number of forwards who should probably go anywhere between 9 and like 15 in the draft. And it's such a waste of talent. And even last year, right? Like David Reinbacher, a lot of people didn't have at 5, but Montreal was like, hey, we need a defenseman. We're going to take him over any number of forwards that could have easily went 5. Which is kind of silly because last year's draft was very heavy forward based and this year's was very heavy defense based. But it seems like that was kind of a misstep by their scouting department. But that's besides the point, right? That's the bed that they've made for themselves. And maybe Reinbacher was their 5th best prospect on their board. I don't know. I'm not in their office. And maybe Tage Ginla is their 5th best prospect on their board. I'd question their prospect scouting a little bit, but that's besides the point. And again, this goes for any team ever, right? Like you look at the best teams in the NHL, right? When was the last time Carolina reached for somebody because they had to fill a need on their blue line, so they took a defenseman way higher than they should have? Or when was the last time Tampa Bay, when their very minimal picks, didn't take the best player available? Or Vegas didn't take who they thought, or who the consensus kind of was the best player available? That doesn't happen, right? I mean, look at Vegas, man. Like, if you want a practical example of teams doing this, right? Like they got a bunch of really good young defensemen in the expansion draft and from other teams, right? Like they had a decent prospect pool. They draft Brandstrom anyway, and they flip him to Ottawa for Mark Stone, right? Like Peyton Krebs to Buffalo for Jack Eichel, who immediately helped their team get better. So you don't have to pick players thinking they're going to be on your team for 15 years. Take best player available, figure the rest out later. No exception. I don't think there's an exception. Like, I really don't, right? Maybe if the exception is the best player on your board is a goalie and you already have 7 goalie prospects. Maybe that, but again, like, don't take goalies in the first round anyway. So that's whatever. That's a whole nother argument. But, right, like, I don't care how deep your prospect pool is at one position and how weak it is at another. You're not building a prospect pool. You're trying to build a Stanley Cup contender, right? You don't win a Stanley Cup because you have a great prospect pool. You win a Stanley Cup by having great players on your NHL roster. And drafting the best player available, whether he is on your team for that Stanley Cup or whether you use him as an asset in order to get somebody who will help you win that Stanley Cup, is more valuable than saying, hey, we're weak at left wing in our development system. We should take this guy who should go 10 picks later just to fill that need so it looks better on the spreadsheet. That's not the point of the draft. All right, Montreal's my target today, but this is a whole philosophy thing. It's something I've preached for a while. I really don't think there's an exception. Take best player available, use that asset, give yourself the best chance to have the best assets. Period. Hoarding good NHL defensemen or hoarding great NHL centers or whatever position it is isn't a negative, right? That's not. Ask, plenty of teams how hard it is to find NHL level defensemen in the draft. There's a lot of teams who have tried to do it for a long time. There's always going to be teams looking for players like that. Take a defenseman. Take whoever your best player available is at 5. Maybe it is Lindstrom. Maybe he's there. Perfect. Don't reach. Never reach in the draft. If you want to reach, if you're that tempted, trade down. And if your guy isn't there when you trade down, well, then at least you got something back for that pick. And you can still take best player available. All right, that's it. That's the end of my rant. Hope you guys enjoyed. Again, a lot of my videos are going to be like this. They're just going to be me sitting down with my camera and talking. and discussing my thoughts. So if you enjoy that kind of content, leave a like, subscribe. I do also want to put up more edited content like my Toronto video was, but those take time. So this is just kind of a quick rant to get something out for you guys. So thank you guys for paying attention. Thank you guys for listening. And NHL Draft's coming up soon, but the playoffs are on right now. Game 7, Edmonton, Vancouver is on tonight. That'll be fun. No Brock Besser. We'll see. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.